All right. Here we go. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam. We began Hilchas Kalayim. We're learning Hilchas Kalayim Prakim Gimel, Dalid, and Hey. Very interestingly, both Gimel and Dalid will be addressing generally the same topic. First, we're going to begin learning in Pei Gimel about certain species that look different, but they're really the same. Other species that look the same, but they're really different. And therefore, they are included in the Isser, as we learned yesterday, in the Holy Land to plant those seeds together. We're going to learn about when you have to separate. We'll begin learning in Pei Gimel. How far do you need to separate? We're going to learn in Pei Gimel the very unusual power of Maras Ayin in Kalayim, perhaps more than in any other mitzvah. And as we'll develop the concept that we are very concerned about Maras Ayin, when we address Maras Ayin, in other words, when you look at the field and these two types don't appear to be together, even if they are really drawing nourishment from each other, imagine you're not violating the Leisita, don't plant your field into Kalayim. In other words, it's not like in other areas of the Torah, that not only may we not violate, we may not also create the appearance of violation. Here, when the Maras Ayin is going to be addressed, then you will address the lav. And more about this, God willing, in the next chapter as well. But Pei Gimel Chavra has 18 halachas. It's very, both Gimel and Daled, you'll see, are extremely technical. Like, first of all, today we're lucky, many of us have the English translations. Not that everyone understands the word in English, but if you'll have pictures, push it to understand, it's technical. Like the Rambam is speaking about many different types of species, as well as when the Rambam begins to explain how you plant them in a row, in a box, in a square, perpendicular, how many patches, how many lines. All of that is very easy when you have the picture. So whoever has access, if you're learning the Chayenu, they did a phenomenal job of putting at least some pictures in here, not some, a lot. And God willing, as time goes on, we're going to get better as Pashat having Sfarim with illustrations, which will make these Parakim that are very easy, Taka Gishmak, because you'll understand what you're talking about, because you'll see the picture. Pei Gimel 18 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. First of all, the Rambam says, Yesh minim bazroim, sheyeh hamin ha'echad nifred l'tsuras harbe, mipnei shinei ha'makoymes v'ha'avodah sho'evdim ha'aretz. That one item, one zera, which is really one zera, they end up looking very different because they were planted over in different places, because in some locations they work the land in one way, in the other location you work the land the other way, and it mamash gives the appearance, it looks like shnei minim. But halacha sometimes will say, no, it's the same. That's a leniency, right? Same means you can plant them together. But hoyel v'heimin achad, einam kalayim zebozeh. And mamish the same in the reverse. Halacha beis. The yesh bazaroim, there's certain species of plants that are halachically viewed as two different types. Shnei minim, even though they look like the other. Even though v'tsuras shneim, the form, the resemblance is kroiveli as tsuras achas. And therefore, when people like us, when you look at it, you might think, oh, this is one. No. V'afal pikein hoyel v'hein shnei minim, even though they have the same appearance. Harei elu asurim zeh im zeh. L'mashal halacha gimel. Now here you go. To fully appreciate this, I'm sure if you were to see, oh, I love Kevin. There we go. You look at the pictures, you're going to be good. So let's go, guys. Lettuce with something that's called chazeres galim, wavy lettuce, or alushim endives with wild endives, kirishim leeks with wild leeks, kuzbar coriander with mountain coriander in kuzbar harim, chardal mustard seeds im chardal. People in America like me, we don't even know what a mustard seed looks like. I think mustard is that brown gook in the. No, it's the seed of the mustard. Im chardal mitzri, the last mitzri is im the last haramutza. So again, whatever these species are, that Rambam writes, Einam kalayim zebozeh. They're not kalayim, and you know when you'll appreciate this? When you look at them, Shuki, and you'll see that they look different. The Rambam knows why they look different. They look different like the Rambam began on Halacha Aleph, because different locations make them look different, because certain cultures planted it by using certain techniques, which mamash affected the external look of the product. So to people that like us, it's different, but they are really the same. Similarly, more about the examples were two items that look different, are halachically the same. Chitim in zunin, wheat and undomesticated wheat. Hasioidim im shiboy l'shual, barley and oats. Kusmim im ashifaim, rye and spelt. Pul im asafir, beans and white peas. V'hapur ketan im hatoifach. Funny for me, I can't even read the English. I love it. I don't know. You have to know what you're talking about. These two types. I grew up in Brazil. I learned how to read. I can read Portuguese. You read Portuguese. Is zucchini. I skipped that one. White beans and azuki beans. So now you know. Kishus im hamalafafine. Zucchini and cucumbers. Then I get, at least I know this from my kitchen. Hakaruv im hateruvtoin, cabbage and cauliflower, beets and sorrel. Even though they look different, they're not different. They are the same. Einom kalayim zebozeh. Now let's give examples for halacha days. Avol hatzuvenim anafos, radishes. He's teaching and Israeli radishes. Give a cook. I don't know what that is. Chardel, mustard, and lafson and bitter cabbage. And these are products that look the same, but the Torah says they're niche, they're not the same. The last Yevon is Greek squash. Guys, squash is like in the pumpkin family. In the last mitzvah is an Egyptian squash, or in the last nemutza, or squash of ashes. No. But they're not the same.
You're not going to get these in Ralph's. Don't worry. Nobody.
I'm not worried. I'm for sure not going to plant some of that. I can guarantee you. You don't have to worry. All right. So we get the concept. The concept is easy. Again, with the pictures, you know. Without the pictures, you don't net know. Can you imagine Moshe Rabbeinu? When Moshe Rabbeinu taught this, I'm sure he brought the products to show the Yidden. We're learning all these halachas. Halacha Dalet, that for sure he brought. It says when the Arba Minim he brought, the whole Priyei Tzadar that he brought an Esrik from Calabria, and he said, "This is it." That's called a teacher. The teacher it shows Halacha Dalet. So thank you, Kevan, for all the pictures. We can have a lot more needed pictures today. How would they doimen? Either look interesting in the leaves or in the peitus, doesn't matter. This is the most external part of the tree. So when a person, like when you look at it, if it's ungepacked with leaves, you'll think it's the same. No, it is kalayim. Now, guys, don't forget, we learned yesterday, interestingly, that kilei ho'elonois mitzadecha is noig midoy raisa, bein ba'aretz, bein b'chutz la'aretz, but the isur is only grafting and not planting. Say that. But whatever the isur is, that is usur. Ketzad, for example, here we go. Tapuach im hachazrur, crab apples. Yeah, it's a machashakling. We have the right people here. I'm just reading the words here. Now, this is difficult. Peaches and almonds. Peaches and almonds are the same. The answer is yeah. When the peaches are very small, when they begin to grow, they look like an almond. More than just the seed. When they come out, when they're budding, when they're coming out, they look the same. It must be. I'm speaking about the peitus or olive, or maybe the leaves look the same. What is Samach smiling? I have no idea. It's like gavaldik.
You eat crab apples every day. You just don't know they're called that.
I love it. That's not everything is in the Torah. You have to zafim im harimin. That's called prunes and Arabian jujube. So he talked it in English. Now I know. We're speaking either about the leaves or about the fruits. No, you can't graft them together. However, the agasim and apricot and hakur, stemelin and white plums, or haporishin No, that's taka different. And well, he found a picture of the Jubu. They're not kalayim. Okay. Also tashir. Das shaynish kalayim. Why? Because they're taka the same. Not only do they look the same, if it looks like a dog, if it works like a dog, the other plants and other trees, nevertheless, guys, listen to this. Now we're already going into the Marasayin. Even though be'emes, the DNA is different. But the Chetzonius looks alike, but they look very much alike. But it looks like two, same product, different colors. But it's mamish the same. Here, guys, listen. This is the chiddush. That means when people begin learning this dinim for the first time, the real novelty in Hilchas Kalayim, as we're going to learn a little bit more in this chapter and a lot more, God willing, in the next chapter, Perek Dal, is this nakuda. Even when things are nourishing from with the other, if you resolve the Madas Ayin issue, there's no problem. That's huge. Nowhere else are you going to find such a din. Normally, not only do you have to keep the halacha, on top of that, sometimes Chazal added Madas Ayin.
What does that match with Gimel Daled?
Because they're Dimyan Gadol. There comes a point also in Lakula that since they look so similar, then there's not a problem. We're gonna have this rule again a lot more in the next chapter. That's a huge, and we're learning this in the Gemara. Like you want to make sure you what, and you learn it again. No, that's what it is. The Marasayin plays a much greater role. Even Lakula, not always Lakula by Kalayim. Halacha Vav. What will be the examples? Turnips and radishes. The Rambam is going from the premise that they're not really be'emes the same. They're two minim, but they're doimin. There's a dinyan gadol. Einam Kalayim zebazeh. B'pnei shepri shel zeh. Mamish looks like the pri shel zeh. Lefes im hanafois. Einam Kalayim zebazeh. Because the leaves, mamish, dinyan gadol shuki. They're like the same. Avol tzunoyin im hanafois. Afa pisho alan doimim zelozeh. He's answering your question. Va'apri doim elapri. Harei kalayim. Hoyel. Another nuance. V'tam pri zeh rochoik mitam pri zeh biyoysev. Now he's adding like another kanech. And even if you have the fruits that look very similar, if the taste now again is rochoik, how do you determine that? The Torah knows that. Rambam determines that. So that's like, if it's so different of a taste, then we don't care about the fact that it looks the same. Gavaldik. The concepts are gavaldik. Halacha zayin. Now we begin. And again, this topic I know begins now, and we're going to have many applications, which is really the bulk of today's Gimel and Dal. Okay, let's go. Now that we established the rules, Zeroyim with the three types, you can't forget that because it's going to play itself out. You may not plant the Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so you can't plant them together. So how far apart do you have to plant them? And there isn't going to be a simple answer. Oy, Gevalt, this is going to be fun. You're going to have pages and pages of different scenarios. So listen to this rule. See, the first thing that Rambam speaks about is not about is it deriving nourishment when you plant them in that close proximity. And we're going to learn the next chapter, the next Pedic, a tefach and a half will be the minimum to prevent nourishment. But the halacha will be that even if it's within a tefach and a half, mamish, we'll see in next chapter. Not only by a wall, we'll learn by a wall. We're going to learn that if the patches are planted in different directions, perpendicular, you see it's separate. It's not mu'urav, which is that I'm saying, first of all, if it doesn't look mu'urav, then you can plant them mamish one until the other. Then you're good. Havalim nidin, if it looks like they were planted be'ervuvia, and here, L'chumra, guys, the L'chumra we know of Marasai is even if they're really not deriving nourishment one from the other, because they have enough of a separation. But for some reason, as the Rambam will give many examples, when you take a look at this field, they look like it was mixed, it was planted with a mixture. Harei ze asur. Wow. Halacha ches. Now the Rambam says, "V'shiyurem rabim yesh barchak azois." We have to go through different types and what's the noyeg of how people plant. So there isn't a one rule. Hakor lefi. Listen to this. He begins with the kolam. Goydel hasada hanizras. Everything also will be connected to the width of the leaves. Vishiluach hayoinkois. I know that yoinkois might sound like their roots, right? How far do the roots grow? But we're going to tie yoinkois also to the branches, because no one sees what's going on under the ground. So it has a lot more to do with the marasayin, with the external, than with what's really happening. Akalayim. So let's go to different scenarios. So deu shohaisa zruya min tevua. Guys, remember that's the first of the three categories. Tevua means only the 5 grains. Ubikesh lizroi betzida. Guys, remember there's tevua and there's zroim. Don't confuse them. Min tevua acher besada acheres. So how much space do you need between tevua and tevua that are normally planted in large areas? Right? No one plants a row of wheat. So there, marchik b'neim beis roiva. The space that you need to plant a roiva akab of tevua. And how much is the beis roiva? Let me go see what he's going over at Samach. No. You jumped ahead. Not Samach, I mean Kaban. Thank you for the picture. Wrong picture. No, it's beis roiva is the biggest measurement. You're going to see this is the biggest one. Beis roiva is 10 amas and a half an hour. Now, you know what the beautiful thing is? That this square doesn't have to go throughout the entire oirach, having one field to the right with one min and the other field with the other min. If you have in any place during that 10 by 10 amos, you see how much it has to be. So for the length of 10, for the width of 10, let's read it inside. So meaning that when a person takes a look, like you have the helicopter view, and you see not only that they're separated in one place, now the other areas may not touch each other, but you won't need this huge width of 10 and a half throughout the entire separation. Alt marasayim, because once you have in one area that separation, as long as the other areas have some separation, the observer sees them to be separated. Now, the im lo yehoyu b'neim kashir hazem. Nowhere, not be'emtza, not from a tzad. Nowhere did you have the 10 and a half by 10 and a half. Then usher, even though you're not allowed to do it. Guys, obviously we're speaking about the Holy Land. Don't forget, Perikal, you have to remember the principles. Zroim are allowed to be planted lechatchila, not kalayim. That's going to be today's third chapter, Perikal. But not vines. You can plant it lechatchila. Speaking about in the Holy Land, asur ve'eino loika. When are you going to get malchus? That was the picture that Kevin had. Now, where do you need to have 6 tfachim? Oh, it's because here you have 2 negatives. Aleph, it doesn't look like it's separated. Doesn't look like it's Beis, if it's within 6 tfachim, it's being yoinik. The yanika is affecting one the other. It's getting nourishment from each other. Oh, now, very good. Here you go. Atkan, tvua. People get confused. Now we're going on to yarak. Guys, you have to always look back. The Rambam defined that all in Perek. We have to move on. It's very easy, push it. But there's different tvua, yarak, halachiyut. Ho yasodeus ro yarak, not tvua. Now we're going yarak. What about yarak and tvua? We'll get to that soon. Ubikesh l'srei see the stay yarak achar. Now the Rambam is going to mention many times the dalas. The what's unique about the dalas, the pumpkin or the squash, is that its leaves are very long. And since we care so much about marasayin, it's problematic because it extends out and it can encroach upon and get much closer. Even the las, marchik bin shtei hasadois, only shisha tvachim al shisha tvachim meruba. Here again, you don't have to do it throughout the entire length. As long as it is anywhere, it can be in the middle, it can be at the corner. We're not saying that there needs not to be any separation. We're going to learn more. There's always going to have to be some separation. We're going to get to the tefach and a half. I think it's going to be in the next chapter. But once some of it has that break, that already shows people, when you take a look at it, it's not the same. It's not planted together. Upachos, nishir zeh asur, mamish like you have by tfuas. You have like different shiurim, right? The 10.5 by 10.5, that's ideal. If you don't have that, up until 6, you're not chayiv malchus. Here also, 6 by 6. But if you do less than that, also. But the eino loika achi yu karevim u'teicha tefach. Okay. Now I know that people are going to be medayik. The betoicha tefach from malchus, and we're going to have tefach and a half. We're going to have a tefach and a half because really, it looks like it's the tefach. To make sure a tefach is very little. You're planting, things. It's not a doimim. It's a tzemeach. Things are moving. You do a tefach and a half, and that's l'chayda. That is where you're not going to have it within a tefach. Okay, Allah yud. Maybe not, but that's just a discrepancy of a tefach and a half. So in both cases, for the yarak, you have like a dorabana, then you have a dorais. Allah yudal. Hoysa achas nishtei hasadis rutvua. Fashenin should see the yarak dalas. So which measurement do you have to follow? The answer is Beis Raiva, the more chamur. The 10, it's K-Eser, 10, like approximately 10. Halacha Yud Beis, that watch it tzarech larchaka b'shurim ha'elu ben shtei hasados. When it's between two fields, that's very important. However, it's not two different fields. All right. And by the way, he writes in the footnote over here that Rambam elsewhere speaks about the size of a patch of land that is called a sada, an area in which you can fit 9 kavim, just to know those shiur. But if you have one field, so deus roi yarak, and veratzel is roi bitzida, not another field. All you want to plant is shura shal yarak mimin achar, one row. So since to begin with, it's not 2 fields, you don't need as much as a separation. One telem means a trench in the ground. Yaakov, it's soon we're going to speak about walls, but it's a similar concept. So there's a lach, there's a trench. The width, the length only has to be 6 tvachim. And v'rachvai ka'amkai. Okay. So the question is, that's a lot? The answer is, no, it's l'chayra. By yarak, anyways, you need 6 tvachim. Beimin ha'emsa, beimin ha'tzad. But we're going to come back there. We're going to get the answer soon. I remember they're learning this yesterday. Just when it's a field and a row, you have to have a trench. We'll get back to that. Halacha Yud Gimel. And you want to plant in it, not outside of it. What's the issue with the luyim? Because like we said, the leaves are long, and what they do is that they not only encroach upon, but they entangle themselves. It makes a real appearance of a irbubia. Marchik b'neim shisha tvachim. But 6 tvachim won't always cover it. Sometimes you make that separation, and yet the leaves now grew. Then ya'akar min hatvua shelifnei hadalas. Remove the tvua. Actually, yisarvu ha'alam. Te'ein tzarach leimet she'im zara shura mimin zeh v'shura mimin achar. Not field. You got a chuki and one row. What's the problem with one and row? There, it can give the appearance easier of entanglement. Because by a field, at least you see this is one min, and this is one other thing. Here it's a row and a row. Shadayoy liyois beneim telem echad kamoishi yisbar. No, there's something about a telem that makes things even more lenient. Halacha yudal kirchik ben shnei aminim. You follow the above distances, but what happened was one species became draped over. which and you made the 10 and a half. You did whatever they told you, but it grew, it expanded. Oh, Yorak al Gabi Yorak, or Yorak Gabi Twach, or Gabi Yorak. The din is, listen to this, Hakoil Mutar, Shaharei Kirchi Kashir. The only exception again is the Dalas, like we mentioned, because it's the Mshechas Harbe, and that's why we just learned that She'im Natsah, what do you got to do? Yakar Milfanel, Kumoi, Shabarani, even though there is a appropriate separation, because it gives the appearance of it being planted together. Masha Enkin and other products, even if they drape one over the other, I left my 10 and a half. Now that a person who looks sees that they were planted separate, he'll notice one came close, but he sees they were not planted be'irvuvia. Halacha tezvav. Hoyu bein shnei aminim bur. You have a natural pit. People used to have pits. They used to store water in there. Or there was a nir. That means that there was a plowed, unplanted field. People used to leave properties, lands fallow for the earth to get its koyach back. Or there was a gapa. A gapa is a stone fence. Or there is a derech, a path. Or a geder, there is a wooden fence. In all of these, if they are high 10 tfachim, or if we speak about the wood, it's deep 10 tfachim. Not like we learned before by the trench, we needed it to be 6. No, since it's 10 tfachim, 4 tfachim is enough. The width is only a 4 tfachim. Or this is a natural barrier. How do you have a natural barrier? You have a tree. Tree has a lot of branches, and they hang down, and that is like a wall. It's a wall that's coming min hashamayim. Or if you have a cellar that's going to and now since again, once there isn't a maras ayin aspect, it completely resolves the problem. Even if the emissaries, they're taking nourishment one from the other, that's called the wall. It's 10 tfachim, 4 tfachim width, then it's okay. You can plant it up until the wall. And that's enough, even though it's only needed. Very good. That watch it. I plant chitim, and you are not me. We're not the same owners. The land ownership belongs to my fellow neighbor. Shenemar sotcha loisizra kalayim. Ein ha'isr elo she'izra sadeu kalayim. V'loi nemar ha'oretz loisizra kalayim. Now the Rebbe spoke about this topic, and he explained, he quoted the Rabbeinu B'chayim, that the issue of kalayim is that you're mixing together different koichas ruchnim. The very fact, interestingly, that you own that field and I own this field, so the mazolois, it's all godliness that's being mashpia, the life is different. One is yours and one is mine, so it's already separated. The fact that it's not a row and a row, it's a field and a field, then they don't mix. They don't mix. And another thing that we mentioned, it's also to remember that whenever there is no mixture, even if there is marasayin, it's also not a problem. We're lenient on both sides. So it's if they're yoinik, but it looks like they're separated, is good. If it's really separated, even if it looks together, it's also good. That's the case over here. They are not, the ruchni is the intermingling is not happening because every person has a unique relationship with their nachasim. That's why Chazal also say that tzaddikim, they're chasan al mamoinam, even for the smallest amount. As we find by Yaakov Avinu, there's a hashgacha pratis that was given to me because I have to be mevared it. It's connected to me. Your stuff is connected to you. That in itself creates a separation. Halacha Yud Zayin, and then that's an inner understanding of this halacha, which appears, mamash, you can plant it together. Halacha Yud Zayin, not intermingled, but there's no harchaka that has to be made. Halacha Yud Zayin. Now it's going to get worse. Okay, so but first of all, there's no issue at all. It's the same seed. Now, muter loy lizroya telem shel pishtan echad He can plant one row of flax, but where will that be? On the side of his colleague's field. People don't do that. Certain products don't match well together. Actually, when you plant them in close proximity, they ruin each other. So now, why would a person plant pishtan near tvua? Only to make a test to see if it's producing, to know next year, instead of me planting tvua, I can plant pishtan. And since people know it was only planted for a test, it wasn't planted for it to remain there, the nimsek is at el hashchasa, which is already less problematic. And lefikach, in reverse, asur lizroya min acher ben shtei sadas elu shehi min echad at sheyarchik metoich shaloi. In other words, I got to make a separation normally. If there is this additional justification that the observer will know that pishtan was not meant properly to be planted here, you're only making a test because right now you have to, that is where I'm less concerned. But whenever you don't have that knowledge, whenever I'm planting a product that could be planted near wheat, so don't forget, guys, where I don't have the right over your land, you have the right to plant your wheat all the way to the boundary. If I want to plant a row of whatever it is different, then I have to leave from both sides a separation as we prescribed above, whether it's 10.5, whether it's 6 tvachim lachatchil. And finally, halacha yudches, choisa sodeyu ustei chaveiroi shebetzida zuruyin shnei minei tvua, which we already learned, no problem, but lo yizra beneim chardal v'choria, the mustard seeds, salt flower seeds, even one row. So you clearly, people look at it and they say, oh, you planted two products, just that intermingled. You planted one veggie, you another veggie. Why? You can plant these two products around other species other than tvua. In other words, chardal, you explain, chardal is not mazik tvua, and therefore you cannot plant chardal near tvua. But as far as planting chardal or this choria around other products, it's okay. It's okay. People they make like a frame. It's not called an eburvia. They surround it with one row, and people know that's how people. And it's people look at it. They know you're not mixing two products together. You're putting a boundary to this product by putting chardal seed. So we're speaking now about one person planting in a formation that one to the other, one is perpendicular to the other. Now we can have a nice picture, or for people who have the chayenos, let's see if he has a picture. No, he doesn't have a picture. Okay. In other words, if guys like this, one patch is planted like this, and the other patch is going to be planted that the edge goes into any part of the side boundary. Where am I over here?
It's diagonal.
Diagonal. Not aligned, but there are different directions. That's also going to be okay. And certainly if what is touching, my friends, is not a corner to a side, but a corner to corner, then clearly based on the rule that whenever the maras ayin aspect is not there, in other words, in appearance, it looks like they were not planted. We don't care even if they are in that close of a proximity. Halacha Peidik Daled. It can be mamash adjacent. Peidik Daled is going to be more about different types of zurayim that could be planted near each other. We're going to go back also to some dinim of yirakos, and all of this will come, as we'll see throughout this Peidik, with many amazing different formations. That the tefach and the half rule halachically is what we say resolves the nourishing one from the other, within the tefach and a half, or we learned in the last Perek a tefach, again, that has to be resolved, then they're nourishing from each other. Minimally, midday rice, at least a tefach and a half, like this, it's separated. But separate from that, you have marasayin. And when are you violating kalayim? When either it has marasayin, or when you have this 1.5 tefachim, and in the reverse, that if you resolve it, in other words, it's not nourishing from each other. Or if there's no marasayin, like we just gave examples at the end of Perek Gimel, where you have two squares, two patches, and they're not aligned. So corner to corner, corner to side, you see it's different. It's a separate patch. Even though the edges are mamish within the tefach, it's also going to be okay. Well, Perek Dalet has 16 halachas. Halacha Aleph. And then you have another two shurais on right adjacent to it of deluyan. We learned in the previous chapter something about the dalas, which could make it more problematic, is that when it grows, the leaves extend more than others, and they also, when they don't just go straight, they intermingle, they become a subach. Ushtei shurai shel pula mitzvi. Even though you only have a telem, vein kolmin v'min. It's even though these are species that are considered tzalayim, as long as you have this telem, and you have these two, you have two shuras.
Because these are rows, not fields.
If there would be fields, it would be less problematic, like we learned in the previous chapter, because there's different fields. One row would be worse. So it's the less you have of one product, the more it looks like you're mixing everything up together. Avol lo yizra shura acha shel kishuyin. Here, you chop it here, clear shuki. Oh, it's one row is the worst. One field is the best. Two is the one level, like every time. Field, 2 rows versus 1 row. That's the worst. Can't plant a row and another row of deloyin and another row of pula mitzri. Even though you have the stellar because since sheminim elu alim shalahem arubchem, this goes really and vinim shachem umistavchen. And and 1 second, and when you have 2 rows, at least when you have 2 rows, you see that the balabas wanted to plant them separately. When it's 1 row and 1 row, it looks like Imamish wants them to get all mixed up. What will happen? Even though you have this telem, but it has the maras ayin, it's going to go over the telem. Halacha base. An entire field, and we're speaking not about zeroyim, not about tfuah, guys. Everyone has different rules, but we're speaking about yerakais. So bikish l'zroi betoicha shurai shal deluyim. So what should you do? Oiker min hayarak makaim shezerei b'shura min adeluyim umavdil beinam ben hayarak betelem, which we said is okay if you have 2 shurais. Here you have more than 2 shurais. Here it's really a whole field. Umaniach min hayarak roichev shteim esrei amon v'oisa shura shniya shal deluyim umavdil beinam ben hayarak betelem v'cheim kol makam sheyirtza shenimtzu bein kol shtei shurai shal deluyim. You have shteim esrei amon. Avol pachos mikan asur. You're planting it in a field, doesn't belong there. And what's again the negative when it comes to the loim is sha'ale mistafchin mikana mikan bayarak shebenayim, and therefore the mira hakol ki'ilun izrabeir vuviyam. So when you're planting rows within a field, you have to have now this 12 amas, guys. 12 amas is the biggest measurement we had up until now. Because the measurement we had in the last Perek, the largest measurement, it was 10 and a half. But here, what unique is you have all the things working against you. It's in a field. Why are you planting it in a field? And on top of that, it's a product whose alin extend. One, you planted 1 squash, it's 1 pumpkin. The ball is right, it's either Marchik base roiva. What's base roiva? Not that much. Not 2 shuras. Here, base roiva, as we learned in the last chapter, it's 10 and a half. I know it's also a lot. It's a lot more than the 6 tefachim. It's a lot more than the tefach and a half, but you don't need the 12. Sharei nimshechu alel ve'echzika makom gadol. V'chol davar sheyeh b'toich base haroiva shemarchikin bein shnei aminim oila min amida. In other words, even if there's a cave there, or if there's a cellar there, Obviously, none of these things that Rambam is mentioning is 10 tfachim tall and 4 tfachim wide. Remember, people are learning one chapter a day. To remember from the last chapter, we're learning all together. Because if you have something that's 10 tfachim tall and 4 tfachim wide, then it's mamish not a problem. Then, yeah, exactly. So the Rambam is saying that if you have items that don't create the halachic rule, Elamai, you have to have this base roiva, you have to have this 10 and a half amas. Yeah, it's part of the 10 and a half amas. You left that distance. Halacha dal. Hatelim, you have a trench or you have an irrigation ditch that are deep 1 tefach. Now, I want to know, what do I do with that area itself? So says the Rambam, if it's 1 tefach deep, I can be zoreya litoichan, 3 types of seeds. Zeroyim, guys, don't forget, we're not talking about yirakos, but about seeds now. Echad al sfas atela mikan, the echad mikan, and one can be inside the trench. Why? Because it doesn't look like it's planted together. Halacha umutar lintoya shnei minim betoich guma achas, even kishus and dalas, who we said whose leaves extend and they get intermingled. In other words, you have to know how to plant things. When you plant something around a ditch, you can plant it in a direction that when it grows, it's leaning towards an opposite side. That nitiyah itself takes care of the maras ayin, which is all we have to be concerned about. And so you have this ditch, but you plant everything crooked. You plant everything that when it grows out, it doesn't grow up straight. So you can really use a very small location, have one going to the north, one planted towards the south, and you're good. As long as you tilt it, so when it comes out, it's going different. Guys, we're speaking here about zeroyim, okay? Just for the record. Now, no, we're speaking even about zucchini and squash. Very good. You have a field and you want to have many long rows, but only one row. Every row should be a different species. So marchik ben kol meishar o meishar shtei amos al shtei amos. Umeitzar v'hoylech, and as we mentioned in the previous chapter, that whenever we give a shir, here we're speaking about 2 amas. All right, every yama, guys, is 6 tvachim. So we're speaking about 12 tvachim because it's only one row. Like we explained in the beginning of this chapter, that when you have very little amounts, you need a larger separation. You don't need to have the 2 amas separating the entire row. Even if you're going to make the rows that are not going perfectly aligned. So as they go closer, as they go further, they're getting closer to each other. Since in one part you had the separation of 2 amas, as long as they don't touch each other, even if at one point at the end of the line they are only a kol shehu apart, you're good. Why are you good? Because when you take a look at these fields, we have this a lot today when we fly. You look down, you see these lines. Now today, because of technology, things are mamash perfect. And they didn't have that perfect lines. You're making the line. You make a line on a paper and cheder. You understand? You begin on one height, you end on another height. Say there. As long as in one place you have the 2 amas, we don't care as long as it never gets fully mixed up. Allah Chazai. Guys, korachas means squares. So some people like planting in lines. Some people like planting in squares. Within any area of a beisa, who remembers? Beisa, guys, is 50 amas by 50 amas. It doesn't matter in this area. You can't make more than 9 different boxes. Every karachas within the size of a beisa will be a beis reiva. Will be 10 and 1/5 cubic.
10.5.
Huh?
10 and 1/5.
10 and 1/5 cubits, yeah.
The for base robot is 10 and a half by 10 and a half amos. Cubits.
That's what he means over here. Okay. Okay, it's that's why he said approximately, Shuki. And here I think when we're dividing it up, we're not going to approximations. We're rounding off an
The Chumash, it's not 10.5, it's 10.2.
10.2. I take it back. We learned before 10.2. Okay, so that's what it is. 10 and a fifth. Okay, not 10 and a half. A correction from yesterday's, from last chapter. So I'll call Rabbi Zajac. The nimtza richuk bein kol karachas v'karachas koroiv le'eser amos pachas rebia. Shkol beisah chamishim al chamishim. Because we're keeping here the lachatchila dikadin that we learned in the last chapter. Even though really we learned that if you do that, as long as you don't get within 6 tfachim, you're good. But lachatchila, make sure that you leave that amount of space between each box. Halacha ches. Uma bein ha-mesher lekarachas, just to know what it means. The word mesher means a very long line. And that's one system of planting, that you planted lines. And karachas, I know karachas by in the other context of tzaras means a balding. But karachas here means squares, planting in squares. Karachas mirubas. Halacha tes. Mina yirakes she'ein derech b'nei adam lezroi mehem ela ma'at ma'at. Kamay she'ba'arnu. Muter lezroya mehen afilo chamishim minim inside one aruga, which is made out of 6 tvachim. How would you do that? Now you have all of these pictures. Okay, so whoever has a chayenu or cave, and now is the time for a picture. If you take a look at both of the boxes, and the Rambam La'am also has it, so you're good. Then, just to take a look, you'll see that if you were to take a helicopter view of this, look how each one appears, because it's to be separated because they are planted in different directions. And even though some edges, some corners will be going into the other line, we already said it's not a problem because they're not in the same direction. Like in the top picture you have in the Chayenu. So look at the A and the B. The left right corner of A is touching the top left corner of B. I don't care because that's corner to corner. And even the E one, even the center one is not touching any of the outer perimeter corners. It doesn't matter, but it's perpendicular. That's what I meant by perpendicular. In other words, it's not aligned, so it looks like it's separated. And one will be in the middle. Now you can see, just to know, in Aleph, the outer ones are called a meshar. Just to get the words, a meshar means a row. In the lower illustration, everything is karachas. You see, everything are boxes. It works. And what you will also notice in this picture is that wherever you have them aligned, there's going to be a tefach and a half. You'll begin to notice a tefach and a half over here. The yarchik then come in b'min kamay tefach u'mechza. Tefach u'mechza is the first time that Rambam is mentioning the magical number where if it's within a tefach u'mechza, it's being yoinik from each other. Biblically, and if you have the approximate tefach u'mechza, even though we learned yesterday's Pedic, last Pedic, one tefach, it means the same over here. It's impossible. Once you begin packing in too much, you already begin looking like you made one big mixture. Bechurva, meaning ve'ein sham zera chutzala. However, aval aruga bein arugais. But if you have a patch between other patches or a row between other rows, here also l'zrei b'chamisha minim, because she'im yizra mikol ruach maruga zu or b'chol ruach maruga shebeveiseah. So then, what do you do with the neighbor? In other words, in the pictures we had before, we were only addressing the box itself. What about the neighboring box? However, even if you do have one box between other boxes, but as we learned in the trench, if you plant the ones at the periphery, not straight down, but to make sure that when it comes out of the ground, it's going on an incline, and each one is inclining towards the inside of its box, that in itself is also a good marasai separation. Mutter. You're going to be mutter. Allah Yudalev, Asaluzrei Chutz Laruga, Belay Talam, Belay Nitiyam. I feel looking at like a Ronish Laruga, Shemam Zeram, Gzeira, Shema, Yizara, Arba Samina, Arba Zavias Aruga, and then the Yizra Minim Achim Chutz Lakanagada Zavias, And then which is the measurement that we spoke about before. And so guys, if you have the picture over here, you have the inner part, you have the inner box. You see that? You have the inner box where you have like these diamonds. And he's speaking about the boundary is like the tefach line all the way around it. How are you going to do that? Because when you come to the boundary and you're planting boxes, or we call them patches on the boundary, you have enough of 1.5 tefach in between each one. If you can take a look at the picture, you have to see the picture. And we said 1.5 tefach, even though that each one on the boundaries are planted in the same direction, but they're not yoinik. 1.5 tefach resolves that. And then you have room inside to plant the rest. Happens to be, guys, I know that in the picture, just for the record, the picture that we have over here has 9. So we have 21. It doesn't matter. It's because it was a bigger size. But if what you will appreciate is that gavaldik. You see, by the way, in the inner boxes, you don't really have a tefach and a half. You'll take a look at it. But it doesn't matter. Because since they are planted as it is in the picture, when you would take a look at it from a helicopter view, you see mamish how everyone is a separate patch. You can appreciate this, the concept of the picture. The yarchik being called min tefach u'mechza. Inside you don't have a tefach u'mechza. You know where you have the tefach u'mechza? On the ones that you planted on the boundary. Where there's a plant and there's a space. There's a plantation box, there's a space. You'll see it's more than a tefach. That which is another din. Why is that? Because Shema Yimaleu, because these are plants that expand and it's going to fill up, and you can't plant more than the patches that we mentioned. And you do have to leave, let's say, the tefach and a half in the boundary. So there's another nuance that there's certain products that when you planted, right now you made a boundary. It's not going to be contained in the boundary, and you don't have maneuverability space because you did it already to the max. Allah Yud Gimel. V'asur l'zroya ba'aruga minei zroyim ki inyan zeh mepnei she'im nidem kekilayim. In other words, it's customary to sow larger plots of these crops. So the types that you normally plant in larger areas, then you have a marasaynish. People will think that you're mixing different products. Like, for example, tavua. People don't plant these small amounts. It's going to be more problematic. Here we're speaking about products that people customarily only plant a little in every location. That is where we allow for you to jam pack it in the way of the picture, because you anyways only plant these little amounts, and they're planted in a position, in a formation that each one looks separated from the other. Halacha Yud Dalet. Gevul shaya goyva tefach. If you have a barrier that's separating one plot of land from the other, but it's tall, 1 tefach. V'zara by minim har mekabei shebeyanu. And now v'nesmait mi tefach ma'achash shenizra by kasher. Remember we learned before, if it's 1 tefach, you can plant even 4 types, each one going in a different direction. What happens now if it's coming down to the ground? Since when you planted it, it was okay, you can leave it. And let's not forget what we learned in the beginning of the series, and that is, not only is planting them together only asur in the Holy Land, but the isur is only on the planting. The product itself, even if someone b'mezid planted it together, is mutter. So this is connected to that. In other words, the isur is not on the chefza. The isur is don't plant them together. When I planted it, I followed the rules. Now the earth seeded. Now you can leave it.
We said that weeding is also asur.
Because I'm doing an action that's strengthening it. Here I'm doing nothing. Very good. Halacha tezvav. And he wants to use his space the maximum possible. Here in LA, a piece of land costs millions of dollars. Understand? You don't want to leave it fallow. So what do you do? Make your garden into squares, even if the size of the squares, like we learned before, 6 by 6, right? And 6 tvachim we're speaking about. Amma by an amma. In every aruga, make 5 circles. So this picture, I think, is the best picture. I don't know if that Rambam has this picture. It's what he's accomplishing. No, he doesn't have that picture. That's the picture he doesn't have. The Chayena brought a picture. Someone can put the picture up over here. That you have to see it. You know what the beauty here is that Pashat, when you plant things in different formations. So if you look at the picture, the ones in the corner are boxes. The ones inside are circles. You see how each one looks different than the other. And you don't have, my friends, the tefach and a half between each one. You don't have that. That's the Rambam has figured out how to make the most use of land. So in every of these circles, you plant one different type. In every one of the 4 corners, you plant another type. So you have 5 and 4. You have 9 different products. You have a tomato and you have a potato. In other words, you're planting all different types. But 9 in every patch. And what's the beauty? That since they look planted not together, then you resolve the whole kilayim. Kilei zeroyim. The einoi mafsid, what do you lose? The Rambam is writing how little. There's very little space lost. That you have to leave charev, because if it's going to fill up, you won't notice the shape. No, it's the shape that separates one from the other. Right? The circle looks different than the square, but if you're going to begin to fill in the circle and make the edges wider, then it's going to be squares. Now the look at that. I don't want to lose anything. The Rambam is saying you can even fill up the spaces in the circle. Samach is smiling. Because guys, in the circle, how do you plant it? You don't plant things circular. You're making rows in that little circle. So let's say you sowed it vertically. So if the area is in between the circle and the corners, you're going to make another plantation, but going on a different direction, then you can do that also. It's interesting that Rambam didn't say lechatchila you should do it. He's speaking about a person who's, let's say, he's a kila, he's a cheap person. He doesn't want to waste anything. Or let's say a tzaddik, no baltashkes. Okay. In other words, if in the circle you planted something in the horizontal, then plant it in the vertical. As long as they give the appearance of muvdalim. And the Rambam concludes, and this is really a conclusion not only of Perek Daled but of Perek Gimel, halacha tezayin, nikol elu hadvarim nisbar lecha. What you see clear, that's the synopsis of what we learned so far. This is a huge chiddush, unique to Kalayim. Shebizman sheyesh bein shnei haminim halchak aru oylahem kedei shelo yimku zemizeh. And we learned it's ke tefach u'mechza. If you have the tefach u'mechza, clearly, my friends, because when we gave all of these examples where by the boundary you're planting, and every boundary we learned above, right, 3 boxes, they're planted in the same direction. All you did over there is you separated the tefach in half. So if you resolve the yanika, you're good. And the biggest chiddush is lekulam ubizman sheyerom uvdalim zemizeh. When you make them appear to be separated one from the other. Because one is square, one is circle. Because the boxes are not aligned. They're perpendicular one from the other. So then we don't even care if the edges come one to the other. Even though in those edges, they're nourishing from each other. Or when we learned you have 2 people that have neighboring fields. In other words, the Marasayim, Yanika. Amazing. Unlike in every other area in halacha, is that marasayin is a chumrah, not a kula. Not only the isra I can never do, even when it's really not also if it gives the appearance, it's also problematic. Here we're not saying that. Here we're saying they are so close, it's called you planted them together. But since they don't look to be planted together, it's also going to be mutter. And that ends the kilei zeroyim and Perek K, which is a little bit of a longer chapter. We have enough time, 24 halachas. Now we're beginning with a new topic. and not to confuse one with the other. This is kilei hakedem. Kilei hakedem is something that whose prohibition is on a much higher level. Kilei zerayim, even if you violated it b'mezid, the product is mutter. Have to get used to that concept. Kilei zerayim, kilei hakedem, as will be defined, is asur bahana. And even if it was done b'shoigeg, it's not an isur gavra, it's an isur chavtza, and not an isur achila, it's an isur hana. It's asur on a very high level, and therefore we will see that midrabanan they extended kilei hakedem even b'chutz la'aretz, like the Rambam will explain. Kilei zerayim, since ba'aretz, it's only asur to plant. So the Chachamim didn't even make exeda l'chatchila muter here in America. Everything we learned above about making your patches and squares and circles, you have a piece of land over here, plant vegetables, viduvils. There's no isur. Kilei hakedem, if it's a vine involved, everything changes. So it says that I'm Perikei Halacha Aleph, Hazireya Shnei Minei Tvua, which, by the way, planting two types of grains is already a problem. What is that called? Kilei zeroim. Or two different types of vegetables. And by the way, if that would be the only issue, that's already a problem. So not only are you planting two different seeds, but you are adding a third product. Guys, this is so important. Kilei hakedem is not a vine and a wheat, midoiraisa. No, it's two different seeds, chita v'sa'ira, which that in itself already in the Holy Land is also to plant. And now you're adding a grape seed. Im zera hakedem, you have a minimum of 3 seeds. You have a minimum of 3 seeds. And if, now, 1 second, it's also anyways. Yeah, the Rambam says, I know that. If you plant that, loikeshtayim. First of all, we began the first chapter of Hilchos Kalayim, quoting the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim. Yeah. You're going to be violating that. And now on top, you're violating another lava. See how the Rambam understands this pasuk? This is a big machlokes rishonim. That's Shitas Rambam. Others disagree with it. The Rambam is saying that when God says don't plant your vineyard with kalayim, it means the isur is on something that's kalayim already by itself. It's already kalayim. Don't now make it worse by mixing it in the Torah vineyard. And halacha beis ve'ena loike mishum zereya kilei hakedem, to get malchus. First of all, you have to be planting only in the Holy Land. I'll tell you why. Because since zera kilei zeroim is lachatchila muter outside of Israel, I'm saying midoraisa. So you can't say that when God says don't plant your kedem with kalayim, he was referring to outside of Israel. Because outside of Israel there is no kalayim. We're not speaking about trees. Trees, yeah, midoraisa. We're speaking about zeroim. We're speaking about the words is alay sizra. Don't forget, by trees the lab was never on the sizra; it was only on the grafting. So Acha Yizra be'eretz Yisrael. And it has to be kalayim by itself, which means, for example, you have one kernel of wheat, you have one kernel of barley, kalayim, and now you're adding a chartzon, a grape seed. Another thing about planting here means to plant it with your hands. That is the biblical violation, and that's the best way of planting. I know today we have modern machinery, but the way you would plant, if you really want to make the most use of your seeds vis-a-vis the earth, is that you would sow it biyadayim. All right? So that's the real issue. Or even if you did not throw the seeds, but you have 3 seeds. Now, the Rambam gave chita and so'ira only as an example. I'll give you another example. Everything that we began in today's 3rd chapter, or that we learned in the beginning. You have 2 different types of yerakos. You have 2 different types of zeiroin, of garden seeds. 2 types that already may not be planted together. If you add in it 1 seed of a grape, that's kilei hakedem, and you get 2 times malchus. If they were on the ground, then all you're doing is covering it over, but you're doing an action. When you cover seeds with earth, you are planting them. Loike. 2 types of vegetables, or you know what? as we said at the end of the first chapter. One tvua, you get it? One tvua and one yerek. Zera echad, yerek, and another zeras min tvua v'chartzon. Whatever is considered kalayim, if you have that, and in addition you add a grapeseed, that is the person violating Kili Akerem, for which they're going to be Chayv Malkus really twice. Halacha Gimel, the Ein Chayv Min HaTorah Elo, al cannabis. Here you go, hemp. The luf is wild onions. V'chayoytza bohem mizroyim shenigmarim im gevar tfuas akerem. Oh, Sanaya halacha over here. That what you can only plant the Isur Midoraisa is when the product takes around the same amount of time for it to get ready. Abul Shar Hazuroyim, which remain Asur, are only Asur Midivreim. The Chain Asur Midivreim, Lizroya Kile Yakenam B'chutz La'aretz.
You just described the local for Chitas Ora and Kartzan.
The worst problem is that a Geffen takes years to be ready. All vegetables by default don't take that amount of time to get ready. So if you have time, you look in the footnote 3, he quotes from the Rambam's Perish HaMishnayos how he resolves this. In other words, there are biblical many limitations le Rambam to Kili Akerem Midoraisa. Midrabanan, guys, also means two separate zeroim and a chartzon, and midrabanan it's also asa b'chutz la'aretz.
The idea that the grape was there from before, it took root and is growing.
Oh, so Danny is, now we're going to get to that soon in the chapter. The Rambam is speaking about where you are planting them all together. Danny was asking what happens. No, what happens if there was already a vineyard? We'll see about this one. Now, hold on. Before we go on, the question is, we learned yesterday that Kilei Zeroyim is not even Asur Midrabanan, b'chutz la'aretz. So why were they machman over here? Halacha 4. Answer is, how are they more chamor? Because if they were planted in the Holy Land, aside of you violating, now the item is prohibited. And you know what? Not only is it prohibited to eat, but they are also bahana. That's why we find this in many other areas of halachim, that the Chachamim say, since the Torah was so more machmir, we're going to add also chumas midrab chametz, the Pesach, etc. Halacha the ein oidrin in hagoy baklein idur, which is hoeing the ground, which is fortifying the ground, making that which was already planted there grow out better. That's something that you may not even do with a goy. Why not? Because a goy is asur. The land may not have in it kalayim, and as we learned yesterday, the ownership of the goy does not remove the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, and you're being misayeya for a product to grow the isur. But if a goy who owns land in Israel or outside Israel is trying to uproot that which is there, if that which is there is halachically kalayim, help him. Because that's exactly what you need to do with kalayim. You're getting rid of something that's called a tifla, something that's called disgusting, because Hashem doesn't want it to be. Halacha ba. Ein asur mishum kilei akerem ella minei tvuos uminei yerakas bulvad. Another thing, it's only tvua and yerakas. Avol shar minei zirayim. Oh, strong correction. So yeah, at the end of Pedikei, we learned about the 3 categories. So the Rambam is making it clear what is asur, tvua, all of the 5 grains. Anything that's in the category of Yerakos. However, anything that's in the category of Zerayim is allowed to be planted. And there's no need to say that planting trees in a vineyard is allowed. You know why? Because planting 2 trees together is also allowed. Halacha zayin. Asur l'zraya Yerakos oituvua b'tzad hakafanim. So even though we said that you only chayv malchus when you throw 3 seeds together. Now, Danny, we're starting with what you're saying. What happens if I want to plant one on the side of the other? And even if the one is already there. Oilita geffen, I already have a vegetable patch. I have a tvua field. Now I want to plant on the side a vineyard. This already goes into what we learned today. That's Pedig Gimel, Pedig Daled. In other words, you have to keep a distance. Because Lashita Saramba Malchus is only Achayizra, Chita, Usaira, Bachartzim, Bemapoilas Yad. Nevertheless, the result will be Harei Zeh Kiddush. The result is, I know the word Kiddush means holy in the context of Kalayim. Holy means it's not good. It's Asr Bahana. And Venesru Shneyim Bahana. Side the Yorik and the Tvua and side the Kfanim. And what do you do with it since it's Asr Bahana? The sword finishteyim. As it says in Parshas Kisei, we learned this last week. This year's Tavshan Pei Beis. Ben Tigdash Hamaleya Hazera. Bafilu Hakashel Tvua. Not only is the good product prohibited, but even the straw, which is in that Tvua, or the vine itself. Every now and then the vines get old. The vines themselves are Asr B'Hanam, and you have to burn them. And don't think that while you're burning them, you can derive benefit from them. You may not. Let's go furthermore. Whether you're doing the planting or if you are maintaining it, what's called maintaining it? Listen to this. Get going. You now notice that there is kalayim in your kerem. Why is that, Danny? Because mitzad the kerem or inside the vines, whether it could have happened naturally. There is either a mitvua or a min yarak, and you, after noticing it, you left it, harei zeh kiddush. With more details in a moment. So another concept. See, this is not a objective issue. This has to do with the fact that you saw it. You now have the obligation to uproot it. Since you didn't do it, it will affect the chefza. But what happens if I saw my neighbor? And therefore, listen to this. I have a vineyard. You're my neighbor. You planted wheat. And I planted my vineyard. You know what? I took the vines and I put it over your wheat. Mamash, I mixed them together. You know what the din is? My kerem, those vines are asur. You can have your wheat. You have certain dinim by kalayim that you don't find any place else. You're kidding me? What? Why? It's mixed. It's a chefza, no? I cannot be mekadosh yours. Or sikech gefen chaveroim. You have gefanim. You already. I planted wheat. I wanted for my wheat to have a psatam of gefen. So I took wrongfully. I had no right. I took your vines and I schlepped it over my tvua. I ruined my tvua v'le kiddush gefen chaveroim, which means that my chaver can harvest his grapes, even though some of his grapes will have in it the tam of tvua. I have two neighbors. I neighbor two people. I want to trip them up. So I schlep one over the other.
Or it's the same neighbors. The neighbor has two fields. You mix them.
Yeah. Here, there's three people now. Me, Reuven, and Shimon. And I made a mixture between Reuven and Shimon. Like Kiddush Echem. Look at that. Now you were not allowed to do that, but you did it. What's the status of product during the Shemitah year, guys? Hefker. The point of hefker means it's not mine. Halacha 9. And v'kimoi. So even though we said that in Adam mekadesh davar she'ena shaloi, and we also learned this gewaldige chiddush, right, in halacha Zayin about me becoming aware of it. So if I became aware of it, the one who observed it cannot have hana'ah. How crazy is that? It's the item itself my chaver can have. He's not aware of it. I became aware of it. For me, it's going to be asur b'hana'ah. V'chol adam mutarim b'hem. But that's only because my awareness has a very limited effect. Only on me, because it's not mine. But if the balabayis becomes aware of the fact that there is a mixture and he doesn't uproot it, now it becomes prohibited l'chol adam because it is his. Or the kamosh arnu is in the opposite, that ein adam mekadosh davar she'ena shaloi. But here there's also a concept in halacha called shabia anafshei chaticha d'yisura. So that's why for me it's going to become asur. Look at these halachas; they're phenomenal. How awareness changes the status of something, not the objective reality, but my awareness of the reality. Halacha yud ha'anos Shazara Kalayim Bekedem Chaveder. You have a mafioso. So like this, who owns it? So the din is, if this mafia guy comes into town and I run away, I hide from fear, from the anos, even if I don't give up hope. Interestingly, then halachically we say, the fact that I am hiding out of fear from this mafia guy, from this strong man, halachically it's considered the strong man's. And therefore, ein adam mekadosh davar she'ein shaloi, but it is shaloi. Harei the kiddush min ha'torah. But the im lo nishtaku abu alam. If I'm not hiding, I'm not. Even though I in my mind, oh, this guy took my field, this bandit, I'll never get it back. But I'm not hiding out of fear from him. Ein mekadosh ella midivrei soifim. The message is, guys, don't hide from fear. It's not going to help. Halacha yudal haruach she'akra po'oros hagefen. So here you have no human being did it, but the wind, for example, it uprooted certain branches and it happened to blow it into a grain field. So the din is yigroir oisan meyad, you have to immediately remove it. The im eiroi oinus v'loi silicon, but if you were unable to remove it immediately, but because of powers that are completely beyond your control, and the chiddush here will be that they grew another 200ths. Why are we speaking about 200ths? That will be a very important yesod, because once you already have kilei akerem, like Arla, how are they bottled? You need to have a mixture of the ratio of 200 to 1. So once they grew beyond that ratio, even if they grew beyond that ratio, since you didn't plant it, number one. Number two, you were not mekayim it willingly, you were held back from uprooting it. Shuki, even though it grew beyond the amount of bittul. Again, this mafia guy, he goes into town, he does whatever he wants, people are afraid of him. He planted in your vineyard wheat. So the din is even on chalamayit. Now the im loy matzah payalim. So then how much money do you have to spend, even on chalamayit, to get rid of that mixture ASAP, up until adding a third of what the common price of hiring workers are? If bikshu mimenu yoysen mikan, but if the workers demanded even more money, actually matzah payalim, you're not chayiv to pay more than a third. All you need to do is continue to search, right, without pressure. You know, you're not. Do you have to run? No, go the normal way of getting workers to uproot it. Like we mentioned before. In other words, if it grew 1/200th, if that happened, now don't forget the anos is not in town. The Rambam wants to make a point that you cannot claim I'm an oinus because I couldn't find workers. You're not mechuyev to pay more than a third, but you were able to uproot it. If it grew that amount, so let's go into another detail. And they're planted together. We keep on mentioning the 200s, but hold on. So let's go like this. When you plant them, you need to have for the grapes to already take root. From when they take root. Prior to them taking root, nothing happened yet. When it comes to the grapes, what's called a vineyard, and when the grape is in the size of a white bean. There are different sizes for the grapes. As it says, if the wheat already completely dried out, or the anavim are already complete, and now someone like the wind blew one into the other, because nothing is being added to it. Kate said, for example, it's already dried out. Dried out means that you can harvest it, Shuki. And now someone planted a geffen inside of it. And after these anovim are ready, that you should not have done it, but it's not going to be miskachois. If you have a vineyard, they didn't even reach the size, like we mentioned in Halacha Yud Gimel, which is when Halacha calls them boiser beis hamachreish, which means very underdeveloped grapes. And And the hishrishu harei kiddush. Why? Like we mentioned, because it's not a kedem. However, v'afal pikein koinsin oisai. And what's the knas? We say you can't have the zera. Aval aboisen mutter. Now ve'im okar hazera koidem sheyaasu ha'anovim kapol alovim. You planted it, which you shouldn't have. Midrabanan. You already took it out. Then harei mutter bahano. Guys, mutter bahano is the anovim. Miksasam nasu kapul alovin umutzusam lenasu eshenasu miskachu v'shalei nasu mutarim. Halacha tezvav anovim shenas kapul alovim. If the grapes already reached that minimum size, and now the zera b'tzidam tvuah mina yirakos. Here also, you planted it, but they didn't take root yet. V'likei tazera kodim sheyashris harei ze mutar bahano. Like we began in halacha yud gimel. Ve'im hishrish, then it's also halacha tezayin. Gefen sheyavshu ha'alen shalom. Its leaves dried out. V'naflu kiderech shetivash hagefen during the winter season. Because nothing is happening now. So asur lizraya betzida yarak oitvua. But like we learned before, but if you planted like Yiddish, another din. You have a non-perforated pot, even though it's laying in the kerem, like Yiddish. However, midrabanan, you give a makas mardus because you are afraid that the person might end up planting in the earth. Avalotzes nakul is mamish ka'aretz. You'll be chayv malkis, and you have to follow the prescribed shiurim above to know whether the product itself became hallowed, became asur bahana or not. Halacha yudzay. Hoya oiva bakerem. And the naflu mimenu zeroyim, you have in your pocket a little lechala, and out of your pocket is falling out these little grains. Or you planted it unintentionally, or you fertilized your field, and in the fertilizer you have some pieces of tvua, or there was a water rose and swept across all different types of zera, or you were actually sowing a neighboring field, or you were winnowing the stay loving, and wind came, and the wind blew it. So let's look at the difference. In which direction did it go? Did you see it? Did you not see it? So if the wind blew, and la'choirav means not the wind came from behind you, but the seeds went behind you. When you become aware of it, like we learned above, you're chayiv to be ma'akid. And if your awareness comes and it grew to 1/200, then it's going to become kodesh. However, if the wind, not the wind came from in front of you, here's the opposite. The wind came from behind you. It carried the seeds in front of you. In other words, you saw those seeds falling into the kerem. This is mamash like Zerdeya. And v'chetzed yatzeh, im tzamchu asavim, yahapich choisim b'machresha. V'dayim. V'im otzam shenasu aviv, you didn't uproot it right away, and they are already beginning to ripen. That's a problem. Then yenapetz oisai aviv kedei lahashchisai. Really, guys, we learned above that what do you have to do with kalam? You got to burn it. Problem is that when certain grains are very moist, when they're beginning to ripen, burning is not the way to go about it. The way you destroy it is you crush them. You have to crush them. Of course, guys, if you have this humongous fire, burn them. It means it became awesome. Now that it's already duggan, so it's easier to burn, then you got to burn it. Now, I want to add a detail. When do the gefanim become usher? Here we're speaking about the geffen was there already. If the grapes grew at least the ratio of another 200ths from when the tfuah was at its side, it's always going to be that way. Halacha yudches. Haroye bakerem esav she'ein derech b'nei adam l'zaroi. Because you want that to be eaten by your animals, or because you know that this type of herb is good for medicinal purposes. A very important Allah. Notice, if you're not doing the planting, it's all about, since you are aware of it, you should uproot it. That is only mekadesh midoiraisa. If people normally plant this product here, for example, hamakayim koitzam bakerem. What happens if you have thorns? Now, guys, people normally don't keep the thorns, but there are certain countries where people appreciate and they leave even thorn bushes. You know who eats thorn bushes? Camels. Who has a lot of camels? Those Saudi Arabians. But Arav, in Arabia, in your location, this product is something that people leave in the ground, and you left it there. Harei Kiddush. Halacha Yutes. Ho'erus, mint, vahakisois, v'shoshanas hamelach, mint, ivy, king's lily, ushar kolim min eziroyim, einam kalayim bakerem. Guys, what did we learn? What's kalayim? Chevra, tvua, and yorak. To the exclusion of the ones that you mentioned. However, there are exceptions. Again, cannabis, hemp, vahakinas, artichokes, v'tzemer gefen and cotton. Hareyhem kishar mini yerakos, they are considered a veggie, umekacho makerem. Chen kol min adeshoyim, she'oilam aleim basode, hareyhem mekacho makerem. You have to really learn the end of halacha aleph, and you have to learn all of these exceptions to understand what is included and what's excluded. Poila mitzri, an Egypt.
Is there like a general rule for us to kind of know what would be excluded?
The general rule is that Tfua and Yerek is Makadesh and Zeroyim are not. That's the words that Rambam says. Pula Mitzri is called Zeroyim. Zeroyim are not Makadesh. Hakonim, bamboo, vetted roses, the Ho'atodim, thorn bushes, are Minei Ilan, the Einam Kilai Hakerem. So it's interesting that there's Atodim and there's Koitzim. So Koitzim is not Minei Ilan. Koitzim Ba'arav in Arabia is a problem. But thorn bushes is a tree. And we learned, guys, that trees are allowed to be planted in the vineyard, on the side of the vineyard.
Translates rush, whatever that is.
Halacha chav, ze'aklal, kol hamoitzi alin me'ikaroi. Any plant that will shoot forth leaves from its roots. Listen to this. That's called the yarak. In other words, guys, you have leaves. Think about a tree. There's the trunk, and at some point, you begin to have leaves. If it's not beginning from the ikid, that's called an ilan. Caper bush, and we have so many halachas about a caper bush because it gives so many different types of paytas. Caper bush is an ilan l'chol davar. And therefore, you can plant caper bushes. It was very common for sure in Babylonia and many other places to plant it in a vineyard. Halacha chafal. Haroya yorik baken. And a yorik may not be planted there. And what did we learn? Your awareness, Shuki, has an effect. But va'amar, you said, I'm in the middle of harvesting. So when I'll get to that row, I'm going to harvest it. I am okay. In other words, you don't have to go out of your seder. However, once you reach there and you forgot, and once you passed it, now that you forgot, you made another statement. Okay, fine. Let me finish the field, and when I will come back, now we got a problem. Again, in other words, generally the rule is from when you had awareness, the clock begins to tick. And if the grapes were added 1/200ths or more, then everything becomes mekudesh, aser b'hana. Here we're saying that if I became aware of it, but I'm in the middle of harvesting, I only begin counting down from when I reach that row. The moment I reach that row and I didn't harvest it, and I'm saying, oh, fine, when I'll come back. Okay, so let's see what happens. Im shah echad mimosayim or more. It's not only is there a mixture, but there is a mixture after you are aware. Hadeza kidesh.
So if it grew 1/200, but you're still in your normal process.
In other words, even though you should have uprooted it, if it didn't grow an additional at least 1/200ths, you can't say you're mekudesh.
So then you don't think it was there.
From when you became aware, and in this deep,
became aware, you see it over there, and then by the time it takes you to get
not
there,
a problem. Not a problem. Not a problem.
It grew the share.
Not a problem. Look at these halachas. Halacha chavbeis. It's like a whole different universe in halachas. Today people are familiar. Your awareness has an effect. Mamish. How do you know if it grew 1/200ths? Listen to the Rambam's technique. Royin, you have to know the following. If you were right now to cut this vegetable, if you were right now to cut this grain, how long will it take for it to dry out? So the Rambam is basically saying, this is based on a Yerushalmi, that a plant will grow at the same speed in time as it takes to dry out. A plant grows as quickly as it dries out. So now, Haga Atzmacha, Sheyivash Achale Tishar B'Leicha B'Meyasha. He's saying, let's say that this plant will take 100 hours for it to lose all of its moisture. What's 1/200? A half an hour. You got the time. If the shtaba aretz misha yel lechatzi shah, hadei zoyzum l'sayim v'asur. But the imsha pachus mechatzi shah muter. This is mamish amazing. Kabbalah kachpolte, right? This concept. The time that it takes to dry out is equivalent to the time that it takes to grow. And halacha chav gimel second to last halacha asur la'avru ba'atzas nakav shuzana b'yarak. If you have a perforated pot and you are walking through a kerem that has in it a vegetable, you may not even walk through, guys. And Danny, you know what that means? Only if it is within 10 tfachim from the ground. I want to tell you that. If it's above 10 tfachim, I don't care if it has a perforation. And let's go into this case of a half an hour. You have an onion and you planted it in a vineyard. And what did we learn, guys? Yarak creates kalayim. So the kerem, you uprooted. But you know what you have? The onion that's asur you left. You have an onion that's asur under the banner of kilei hakerem. And then now that you uprooted the vineyard, now from this onion, more growth came out. Even though you have more than the amount needed for bittul, which is this ratio of 1/200, that physical piece of onion that was in the ground when the vine was there, that always remains awesome. I want you to know like this. The Ran argues with all of this. The Ran says a batzel is something that the zaroi is not colored. It doesn't dissolve in the ground. It doesn't rot in the ground. The Ran holds that since that's asur, everything that comes from something that's asur remains asur. The Rambam doesn't say that. The Rambam says that part will always remain asur. But if you have a ratio of the bittul that's needed growing out of that onion, that will become permitted. God willing to be continued. That was fantastic.